Oh, I just breathed in all the smoke off the... Oh, that went right up my nose. Merry Christmas! Today we are watching The Muppets Christmas Carol, and we're going to see how historically accurate it is. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's got singing lobsters in it. Why does it need to be historically accurate? And the answer is it doesn't need to be historically accurate, which makes it very interesting when it is. The other thing I'll say about this film is I know that it's a lot of people's favourite Christmas Carol adaptation. I don't have any nostalgia goggles for this film. I didn't watch it until I was a grown-up. So for me, I grew up with lots of other Christmas carols. I don't necessarily think this is the best one at everything, but it does do some really interesting choices. So I'm going to be looking for three main things. First off, is it faithful to the book? Secondly, is it faithful to the time period, which is 1843, not including the time skips? And thirdly, does it portray a British Christmas rather than an American one? And there are some big differences. So we're going to have a look through the film and see what they get right. Stop it this early, but so we're panning across London, and already I can see some slight weirdnesses about the buildings. The buildings look very Tudor, like they look really early, and I can see a lot of wooden shacks, basically. They have this, what we call half-timbered appearance, where half of the building is sort of solid timbers, and then the gaps in between them are filled in with what's called wattle and daub. And those... There wouldn't have been many of those left by 1843. There's almost none left now. I'm not saying there were none, but this is supposed to be Victorian London, 1843. Scrooge's office is in the city, so you could easily have the Dome of St. Paul's on the horizon. A lot of movies do that. You see St. Paul's a lot in Mary Poppins, for example. I would like to see some more like big Victorian chimneys. It look a little bit more industrial, a little bit more Victorian. It also just looks a little bit provincial. Like the tallest houses are, 2 stories tall, which you would not expect for what is, at that point, the biggest city in the world. A Christmas Carol is deeply informed by the Industrial Revolution. Dickens was really concerned that we weren't celebrating Christmas like we used to in medieval times. Which is true. I mean, we dropped a lot of medieval Christmas practices by then. When you used to live in a village in the medieval period, there would be a lord who owned the entire village, and he would invite everybody from the village to his house for a huge feast for free. So once you leave the village and go and work in a factory in the city, you don't have that anymore. And also you're working in a factory rather than a farm, which means you have to beg for Christmas Day off, which is what Bob Cratchit does in this film. So Dickens is writing this to try and persuade people to celebrate Christmas properly again, like they used to in the olden days. So it's very, very influenced by the Industrial Revolution. Scrooge is very much a product of the Industrial Revolution in the way that he watches the clock. So I'm kind of disappointed to see such an early modern vibe to the city, but it does look very picturesque and very chocolate box. This is a London made entirely of gingerbread houses. However, one thing it does get right is the kind of crookedness of London. You can't see any straight lines in what would be the roads in these houses, which really lines up with how Dickens describes where Scrooge lives. He envisions it as this very crooked, cramped little set of courtyards. So that really does line up. We've got a bit of Good King Wenceslas in the score there. Did Good King Wenceslas exist by this time? I think it might have. Hang on, let me check. Okay, according to Wikipedia, the tune existed, but it wasn't a Christmas song until 1853. So, I mean, I'm going to give that a pass. Obviously, it's fine. I had to look it up, so it can't be that distracting. Okay, so we've got our first glimpse of some costumes here, and they're actually look really good. 1843, like those are bang on. You've got these little tight bonnets which are starting to come in. The top hats look right. Yeah, this looks good. Like even the costumes for the Muppets look historically accurate. They're very well done. I love how the Muppets have sideburns. Like that's accurate. That was the fashionable way for blokes to wear their hair. These massive sideburns in the 1840s. So I'm really happy to see that on the Muppets. Like somebody had to think about that.
Christmas apples. We got Macintosh.
Oh no, I stopped it. We very quickly saw what we call a peeler there, which was the Victorian slang for a policeman. And I think that was really accurate. Like maybe his tunic was a little bit too bright blue, and apart from that, it was like dead on. They used to wear these like reinforced top hats before helmets came along. That was bang on. That was really cool.
Welcome to the Muppet Christmas Carol. I am here to tell the story.
And I am here for the food.
So Gonzo is playing Charles Dickens in this one, and that means that they can deliver the narration lines like directly to camera, which is a nice touch. I don't know of any other adaptations that do that. It's something that I think probably would only work in a children's version, but it is really nice, and it means that they can cram in lines straight out of Dickens from the narration that you don't normally get to use.
The Marleys were dead to begin with.
Oh, well, pardon me?
Okay, the opening line from A Christmas Carol genuinely is, Marley was dead to begin with, which is a banger of an opening line, and I'm glad they were able to keep it in.
As dead as a doornail.
He also says Marley is as dead as a doornail. That is straight out of the book. And he also has a little tangent about, oh, I didn't invent the phrase as dead as a doornail, and it is a bit of a weird phrase.
There he is, Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge.
Love the Dutch angle introducing Scrooge.
When a cold wind blows, it chills you to the bone.
But there's nothing in nature that freezes your heart like years of being alone.
Okay, so that's really interesting. There's nothing that freezes your heart like years of being alone. This is something that I find a lot of adaptations get wrong about Scrooge. The problem with Scrooge is not that he hates Christmas. Nobody cares. Like, why bother celebrating Christmas? The problem with Scrooge is that he shuts himself off from everybody, and that is particularly shown at Christmas when you're supposed to be with family and supposed to be with friends, but it's a problem all year round. Before he tells us about what Scrooge is like with money, before he tells us how mean he is, Dickens tells us that he was alone, that he was solitary as an oyster. He just projects this vibe of don't talk to me, which is a very London trait. Shout out to Mr. Draper's hot potato wagon in the background.
He charges folks a fortune for his dark and drafty houses.
Is Scrooge a landlord? He's a money lender, so I guess he would loan you money for a house, but I don't think he's a landlord. I guess it never says he's not.
Please, sir, I want some cheese.
So that's a shout out to the line from Oliver Twist.
Please, sir, I want some more.
So we've got some more Dickens references coming in here.
There goes Mr. Sneer.
That puppet man is doing a Punch and Judy show, which is a homegrown London puppet tradition. And so that's a really nice little touch that you wouldn't necessarily expect an American to know about, although I guess if you're into puppets, you probably do know about it.
Scrooge liked the cold. He was hard and sharp as a flint, secret and self-contained, as solitary as an oyster.
Hard and sharp as a flint, solitary as an oyster, that's straight out of Dickens, and honestly one of the best lines in the whole thing. So it says Scrooge and Marley on the door, which is correct to the book, but I'm not correct to the film, right? It should be Scrooge and Marley to the film, because there's two Marleys in the film, but in the book there is only one Marley, so that is correct.
Whew, what an unpleasant fella.
He was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone.
Okay, so we've got Charles Dickens in a new costume now, and I really like this one actually for him. Something that you can't really tell about Dickens from looking at black and white pictures, is that he was a really showy dresser. He would wear these elaborately patterned waistcoats. He would wear loads of rings all at once, possibly because he was poor when he was a teenager. But it's something that people remark about him, like he's kind of tacky in how he dresses. So I like how Gonzo here has a really brightly coloured costume.
He was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, clutching, covetous old sinner.
Yes, that is a line straight out of Dickens, and it's so good. It's something that you don't see in every adaptation because, again, there's usually no Dickens character, so I'm glad they got it in. It's a real banger from Dickens, that one.
Who is this?
It's Mr. Applegate, sir. He's here to speak to you about his mortgage.
Please, Mr. Scrooge, I know you're very angry about this, and I didn't mean to fall behind in the payments, Lord.
So this Mr. Applegate character isn't from the book, but it does introduce Scrooge's character nicely, so it's fine.
Because I'm the stone you can't squeeze blood from, and that's the truth. Thank you for not shouting at me.
So Scrooge in the book doesn't have a whole room full of bookkeepers. He only keeps one clerk, and that is Bob Cratchit. He will not pay for anybody else. Something that the book actually points out is that it kind of doesn't matter how much money Scrooge makes because he doesn't spend it, so even on himself or even on his business. So he certainly wouldn't be spending money on the salaries of all these bookkeepers.
Please, Mr. Scrooge, it's gotten colder. Any bookkeeping staff would like to have an extra shovel full of coal for the fire.
So this is kind of something that happens in the book. So Dickens does specifically mention Scrooge in his office has a tiny fire, and Cratchit in his office has a tiny fire with one single coal on it. And Dickens says, well, what would happen if Cratchit went into Scrooge's office and asked for some more coal? Well, then he would be unemployed. But neither of them ever have to say it out loud. They both just know it.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle Scrooge. God save you.
Merry Christmas. Humbug.
Christmas a humbug, Uncle? Oh, you don't mean that, surely.
Merry Christmas, you say. What right have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
What right have you to be dismal? You're rich enough.
If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips would be cooked with his own turkey and buried with a stake of holly through his heart.
So the original line is boiled with his pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. Victorians did eat turkey at Christmas, but it wasn't the only thing they ate. There wasn't really a specific Christmas meat yet, so they'd have goose or beef or whatever. So that's a bit of a modernism creeping in there. I guess they thought Americans wouldn't know what a boiled pudding is, a Christmas pudding. You have Christmas puddings in... Do you have Christmas puddings in America? And even if you do, I guess you don't boil them anymore. You just microwave them these days, right? So, I mean, I can understand why you would think a child, a 4 or 5 year old wouldn't get this line, so you'd change it. It's fair enough.
Nephew, you keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine.
And though it's never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that Christmas has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it.
And how does one celebrate Christmas on the unemployment line?
This is the 1840s. There is no unemployment line. There are no unemployment benefits. So that is something that really happens. The nephew really does give this inspirational speech about Christmas, and Bob Cratchit stands up and applauds, and then realizes what he's done. And I don't know. I think it's funnier in the book because Scrooge doesn't need to yell. He just sort of realizes that Scrooge is looking at him and turns away to, I was just poking the fire. And as he pretends to poke the fire goes out.
Are there no prisons, no poorhouses?
Oh, plenty of those, sir.
Oh, excellent. For a moment, I was worried.
What might I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to remain anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. I do not make merry myself at Christmas, and I cannot afford to make idle people merry. My taxes go to pay for the prisons and the poorhouses. The homeless must go there.
But some would rather die.
If they'd rather die, then they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population.
So this was a real thing that people said at the time. Malthus is writing his stuff about the poor are going to breed like rabbits and there's not going to be enough food for everybody. Yeah, you can see Dickens refuting this fairly modern idea for the period. Oh, and they're all writing with feathers? They had pens. They had purpose-made pens by 1843.
It's a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every December the 25th.
Okay, editing Jenny here. I know this video is about historical accuracy, but I've just noticed this. Even Ebenezer Scrooge gives his employee the day off paid. That's what he's arguing about here. It's not that no work's going to get done, it's that he's going to have to pay for a day of no work. Now, in the book, he does push back against this a little bit, but Bob Cratchit doesn't have to say anything to convince him, yes, the day should be paid. Of course the day should be paid. So we don't know very much about what Bob Cratchit looks like, but the one thing that Dickens consistently tells us is that he has a white scarf, and he's clearly wearing a coat that stops at his waist, because the scarf goes under the coat, and then you can see it trailing out of the bottom of the coat. And Dickens is saying, oh, look, he can't even afford a long coat, but he's got this big white scarf on. Now, I'm kind of a little bit disappointed not to see the white scarf, but it's fine. It's a small thing.
Now, once again, I must ask you to remember that the Marleys were dead and decaying in their graves.
Yuck!
That one thing you must remember, or nothing that follows will seem wondrous.
Why are you whispering?
It's for dramatic emphasis.
Oh.
That's very close to the line, but they have changed it. I'm not super sure why, because they're usually pretty good at leaving Gonzo's lines exactly right, but the exact line from the book is, "This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate." I don't know, maybe they thought that a 5-year-old wouldn't quite get the syntax for that. So, the Marleys. In the book, there's only one Marley, Jacob Marley. This extra Marley has been invented so that they can use Statler and Waldorf. There's only one Marley in the book. It's fine to put another one in, but I've genuinely met people who didn't realise that there was only one in the book. So yeah, if it was 2, then why is only one of them becoming the door knocker? I mean, it's fine. Just, yeah, they would have... If they were writing this from the bottom up, they would have done it differently.
Are you hurt?
To say that Scrooge was not startled would be untrue.
Even those boots, you see the soles of his boots, and they're pretty good, man. They're good shapes for the period.
Scrooge made his way up the staircase, caring not a button for the darkness. Darkness was cheap, and Scrooge liked it. To conduct a proper search, Scrooge was forced to light the lamps.
Yeah, he doesn't do that in the book. I'm guessing that's so that he doesn't have to be carrying a candle round all the time. I guess, yeah, that's just a trick for the film, so they can say, okay, we're turning all the studio lights on now. Dickens is quite careful of telling us he just has a candle, and it's like a really crappy candle as well. And that's another really nice image that Dickens paints for us. The thing is about Scrooge is that he's not a hypocrite. He also does not want to spend money on coals for himself. So he has to hutch really close to the fire to get any warmth out of it at all. So it's really nice how they've painted Dickens' words there. You can see a big room, and yet he's just using this tiny bit of it so that he can hutch himself close to the tiny fire he's made for himself. So that is true. Marley's arrival is heralded by the ringing of all the servant bells in the house. Not that Scrooge keeps servants, but there are still all the old bells in the house from whoever used to live there before.
Oh, look! It's Ebenezer Scrooge! Looking...
Okay, so it's a little tricky to see exactly what the Marleys are wearing, but you can see that they are wearing short coats. And basically, Dickens describes Marley as being quite old-fashioned in his dress because he dies 7 years before the book begins, and presumably he was a pretty old guy who had an old-fashioned dress sense even at the time he died. So he describes him as almost sort of Georgian in his dress. He's got a little pigtail wig, and he's got his breeches and stockings. I think these guys are wearing breeches. It's a little hard to tell. I would have liked a proper Georgian wig. That would have been nice, but you want to keep your brand integrity for your characters. It's fine.
You may be a bit of undigested beef, a blob of mustard, a crumb of cheese. Yes, There's more of gravy than of grave about you.
More of gravy than of grave is indeed from Dickens. I like how they call it out as being like something they would say. But yeah, that one is out of the book. Alright, my camera ran out of battery, so it's a different day now. I'm sure the light won't be any different.
Expect the first ghost tonight when the bell tolls 1.
Can't I meet them all at once and get it over with?
So, the timings in the book don't really make sense. Like, Marley tells Scrooge that the spirits are going to come on 3 separate nights, and then that just doesn't happen. Scrooge goes to bed at like 2 a.m, and he wakes up and he hears the bells striking midnight. So there is definitely some like time weirdness going on in the book, that the spirits are messing around with time. Because that's their whole deal. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure Dickens also gets it a little muddled himself. All right, we have Ghost of Christmas Past with us. Ghost of Christmas Past is, I think, the hardest one to depict visually because Dickens is really unclear about what it actually looks like. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle on it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. It's a weird description. The figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with 1 arm, now with 1 leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. It's a weird description. Even Dickens's illustrators, I think, didn't really know what to make of this. What everybody gets is that it's got like a long white robe on it. They usually show it lighting up the place as well. Dickens talks about it having a light coming out of its head that you can shut off. It can shut off if it pulls its cap down. But yeah, Ghost of Christmas. I feel really sorry for any production designer who has to do Ghost of Christmas Past. It's a weird one.
What business has brought you here?
Your welfare.
A night's unbroken rest might aid my welfare.
Your salvation, then. Take heed.
What are we doing? Nothing. What? Well, just hold on. What?
That's a grappling hook. Did you grappling hook a person? Jesus.
And Scrooge was conscious of 1,000 odors, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares, long, long forgotten.
It's my old school. I was a boy here.
These are but shadows of your past, Ebenezer. They can neither see nor hear you.
And what a flood of memories came back to him as Scrooge beheld his old classroom.
Every now and again, Gonzo will have a line that sounds like it's from Dickens, but isn't, like that one about, Scrooge beheld his old classroom, which is fine. It ties the scenes together. It's just, it's interesting.
Come to sleeping. Come on, he never goes home for Christmas. Who cares about stupid old Christmas?
So this is ever so slightly different in the book. Scrooge as a boy doesn't hate Christmas yet. He wasn't like born hating Christmas. It was sad for him as a boy at Christmas, but like he did have books, and there's like a scene where he sees the characters from his books sort of come to life. The Ghost of Christmas Past is showing like how Scrooge came to be the way he is, whereas in this version it seems like he kind of already hates Christmas. This is very much more Freudian, right? Which, Dickens wouldn't have known about childhood trauma. It wasn't really a thing that people had thought about yet.
Yes, work hard, work long, and be constructive. Oh, Ebenezer.
So this is something that doesn't happen in the book. We do see Scrooge's teacher very briefly, and Scrooge mentions how he was terrified of him as a child, but he doesn't tell him, do nothing but work your whole life. that he just tells him, "Oh, you're going home this Christmas." So I wonder if this has been put in to give Sam the Eagle something to do, maybe?
Today, you become a man of business.
I'm looking forward to it, Headmaster.
You will love business.
Okay, so in the book, he doesn't get out of being left alone at Christmas at school because he's got a job. He gets out of school because his sister comes and tells him, "Oh, Dad's different now and he's ready to have you at home for Christmas." And to be fair, it is completely out of left field. Like, we don't know that he has a sister or a dad, or that his dad has left him at school on purpose until his sister turns up and tells him, "Your dad's not leaving you at home at school on purpose anymore." So I don't think this is necessarily a bad change.
A moment later, Scrooge found himself standing on a city street looking at a building he had not...
Fozziwig and Mom Limited? Who's Mom? Do you mean Mrs. Fezziwig? That's very American, if so.
This is Fozziwig's old rubber chicken factory.
Okay, so in the books it's Fezziwig, and that's just a nice piece of luck on the Muppets' part that Fezziwig sounds so close to Fozzie, so they could just change it. I think that's fine as a joke. And he does not have a rubber chicken factory. I'm actually not sure what he does. Hang on. Yeah, in the book it doesn't say what Mr. Fezziwig does for a living, only that he has some apprentices. So, I mean, you guess that it's something similar to what Scrooge ends up doing with his life. But yeah, we don't know. So maybe it is a rubber chicken factory.
And there he is, old Fozziwig himself.
Look, my lads, dusk has fallen.
Alrighty, so we get a look at Fozziwig's costume, and that's actually pretty accurate. So the idea with Fozziwig is that he's a grown-up when Scrooge is a boy, so he's going to be dressed in a very old-fashioned way compared to 1843, with a wig, with breeches, with a short tailcoat rather than a greatcoat. And yeah, that's actually pretty good. Although, I guess Fozzie Bear isn't wearing shoes, and Fezziwig would have worn shoes. I don't know a huge amount about Muppet lore, though. I don't know if maybe Fozzie Bear has some sort of thing where he doesn't wear shoes.
What an employer he was. As hard and as ruthless as a rose petal.
That's one of those lines that sounds like it should be from the book. He was as hard as ruthless as a rose petal, but it's not. That's newly made up.
It's the Marley brothers. My old partners as they were as lads.
And that's put in for the movie. Scrooge doesn't see Jacob Marley at Fezziwig's ball.
Pleasure having you. Please enjoy yourself. That's what.
Excuse me, Mr. Fozziwig.
Excuse me.
Sir, I've been going over the accounts. Do you know how much the firm is spending for this party?
Master Scrooge, this is Christmas. It's a time for generosity. Stop working. Enjoy yourself. Go meet some people. Go ahead.
Okay, I actually really dislike this change. Scrooge used to like Christmas. That's what the Ghost of Christmas Past is showing him. Hey, you used to like Christmas and you used to have friends. What happened, man? And not this guy, like, has something wrong in his brain and he was just born without the
Christmas gene
and needs to have it beaten back into him by ghosts. Like, specifically, the spirit actually, like, talks to him about this, like, about how much the party cost, and says, why do you think Fezziwig was so great? If he just, like, spent £5 on a frivolous party for no profit. And Scrooge argues against his own worldview at the spirit. He says, no, it wasn't about the money. It was about what a good time we had. And so he's, like, making the change in his own brain. He's arguing against his own starting position, which I think is so much more interesting as a character than just you need to be taught about Christmas. Christmas is a Christian holiday traditionally celebrated on the 25th of December. If the Fezziwig's party didn't teach him how good Christmas is, then what are the spirits gonna do?
I can think of two reasons why they made this change to Scrooge's character. The first is theme.
Dickens' thesis is that we used to celebrate Christmas properly, and we have now lost our way. And that's the same as Scrooge's journey. He used to celebrate Christmas properly, and he has now lost his way and needs to go and get it back.
But in 1992, that isn't really a relevant theme for baby millennials. Like, there isn't a strong yearning to go back to celebrating all 12 days of Christmas at your landlord's house anymore. If anything, any Christmas nostalgia we have is for the period when A Christmas Carol is set, when Christmas was less commercialised and you didn't have to have a take on the John Lewis advert. The second reason is the audience the film is aimed at. Dickens' book is very concerned with adult problems.
You changed.
Not recognising who you were when you were younger, the fear of mortality, the obligation to do real charity work in the community. These aren't things your average 5-year-old is going to relate to. So I can see why the filmmakers wouldn't put a very high priority on Scrooge having lost his way over a period of decades and needing to rediscover it. But as a grown-up, some of my favourite parts of the book are the parts where this disparity between Scrooge's younger self and his present self are clearest, and I'm sad to see them sanded off.
No,
excuse me.
Oh, Master Scrooge.
Excuse me.
Belle, I'd like to introduce you.
So, them kind of changing Scrooge's character in this way kind of tanks Belle's character, because why does she fall in love with this guy if he's just a stuck-up prig? They're just the only two humans in the room? Is that it? She falls in love with him because he used to be cool and nice. And the spirit is showing him, hey, when you're cool, then girls like you. It's like motivation or something.
How could we marry now? There's not even enough for a decent home. The investments haven't grown as they should.
So you said last year?
I love you, Belle.
You did once.
Okay, this is also a little bit different in the book. Scrooge does not say, we can't get married yet because I don't have enough money. He doesn't bring that up as an option at all. He wants to get married, but it's Belle who breaks it off and says, look, hey, we've been engaged since we were kids. You obviously have changed. You don't love me anymore. You love money. Something's different about you now. Whereas here, he's not changed. She should have known what she was getting into. He was always like that in this movie. So again, the spirit is showing him, hey, you lost out on the love of your life because you turned mean. Maybe don't do that. But you used to get chicks, and now you don't anymore. Now you're a lonely old man. The other thing I really like about the book is that it shows us that Belle is happy. She gets a happy ending. She marries somebody else. She has a load of kids, and they have amazing Christmases when she's an old lady. And Scrooge doesn't. He doesn't get to join in with that.
Spirit, show me no more. Why do you delight in torturing me?
I told you, these were the shadows of the things that have been.
Leave me.
In the book, you can see the visions of the Ghost of Christmas Past by the light that emanates from its face, right, from its head. There's a light coming out of its head. And when Scrooge does not want to see anymore, he simply takes the Ghost of Christmas Past's cap and rams it down over the ghost's head. And he just means to put it over the light coming out of its head, right? Except accidentally he pulls the hat all the way down to the floor and kind of kills the Ghost of Christmas Past. I'm glad that basically no adaptation tries to do that because it's really weird.
Come in and know me better, man.
Okay, so this is pretty accurate to the book. Dickens describes the room as being covered in greenery and there being just piles and piles of Christmas food lying around. Although here it seems to be mostly carrots. I think that's 50% carrots by volume. He also describes the spirit as looking pretty much like this. He's a big, beardy guy. He's wearing a green robe. He's got holly in his hair. He's so big that he barely fits under the ceiling. Although Dickens does specifically point out that the Ghost of Christmas Present changes size to fit whatever room he's in, so he never actually has to crick his neck. He's always just big enough for whatever room he's standing in. So that line, "Come in and know me better, man," that is from the book, although he doesn't repeat it because he's forgotten that he's just said it in the book. He is able to have a short-term memory. That's fine, though, either way. But I do wonder if they made that change specifically so they could put in the joke,
"You're a little absent-minded spirit."
No, I'm a large absent-minded spirit.
that joke's an antique.
It's in the singing of a street corner choir.
Okay, is that supposed to be the Salvation Army? Because, first off, they didn't exist in 1843. They're from the 1860s. Secondly, they don't dress like that in this country. From having seen Guys and Dolls, I think that's how they dress in America. You might get a Salvation Army brass band at Christmas in this country, but a choir, not so much. It's weird because we had carolers earlier, so why can't we just have those carol singers as our street corner choir?
In the giving of a gift to another.
I see there he is changing shape to fit the place he's in. So I guess they did read that part of the book. Who knows? I will say I really like having the Ghost of Christmas Present as a big puppet. I think my disbelief is way more suspended when it's a big puppet than when it's just a tall actor who's been scaled up. I much prefer it being a puppet. In fact, I think I prefer all the ghosts being puppets. I think every adaptation should have at least the ghosts as puppets.
Yes, when you do your best for love, it feels like Christmas.
Okay, so this is a thing that happens in the book. The Ghost of Christmas Present takes Scrooge all around the world to places where you wouldn't expect them to be celebrating Christmas, and shows him that, you know, even in dire circumstances, people do still carry Christmas in their heart. So he takes him to prisons, he takes him to workhouses, he takes him to a lighthouse and a ship in the middle of the ocean. Like all places where it's really difficult to, you know, put up a Christmas tree or have a big feast. And he shows him, oh, look, people are still like wishing each other Merry Christmas. They've still got Christmas in their heart. They're still humming a merry tune. Like even these people are celebrating Christmas. What's wrong with you, man? However, the prisoner uniform, I don't think is accurate to 1843. So by the 19th century, we are starting to professionalise prisons, so they are starting to get uniforms. And once we do get them, those big cartoon stripes aren't a thing in this country. There's some prisons that have arrows on their uniforms, and some prisons that have like little pinstripes, but I don't know of any that have those big blocky cartoon stripes. I think that might be an American thing.
Sharing the ways of love made clear. It is.
I love the chorus costumes here, both the Muppets and the humans. The costumes are all bang on. I like how all the women have bonnets, how the gentlemen aren't just all dressed in black. They have, you know, a bit of mustard and a bit of red in there. Fancy colours were quite popular for menswear in the 1840s, especially on things like waistcoats. I love how all the bonnets are trimmed, how women have got shawls. Like, they've not just bunged them in a dress. They have really thought about each one and making sure they've got every single accessory. I really like it.
Singing of a street corner choir. It's going home and getting warm by the fire.
I know they're doing that dance move because the puppet can't dance very much, but it looks like they're doing it because that's the most Michael Caine can do.
Game. Oh, yeah! That's a great game. Yes, I'll be it.
Yes, let Fred be it. He always thinks of good things.
I love Clara's headpiece and her ringlets. She has a fantastic period accurate headpiece there. And movies are often so loath to put their lead actresses in these silly little lace tippets that used to be fashionable. So I'm glad to see the Muppets Christmas Carol has gone for it.
Do people play games at Christmas?
I love games.
Do people play games at Christmas? Scrooge! You're not an idiot.
I do have a good one, Clara. Guess.
He was thinking of an animal, a live animal, a rather disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London and walked about the streets and wasn't made a show of and wasn't led by anybody and didn't live in a menagerie and was never killed in a market and was not a horse or an ass or a cow or a bull or a tiger or a dog, a pig, a cat, or a bear.
It's Ebenezer Scrooge.
Yes.
And then when they do guess it, one of them's like, well, he is a bear. I'll let the candle go out.
It smells so good, Mother.
It does, doesn't it?
All right, we've got our appearance of Mrs. Cratchit, played by Miss Piggy. And they've got a difficult needle to thread here, right? Because they want to keep a little bit of Miss Piggy's character, and she's supposed to be very glamorous, whereas Mrs. Cratchit is absolutely not. So I think that what they've done here really works. So what they've made Mrs. Cratchit is just a little bit technically unfashionable for 1843, but it means that they can use 1830s fashions, which are very much more Miss Piggy's style. So they have the really high puffy sleeve, that big lace collar that's really frilly, the cap's frilly as well, and those golden ringlets. Very, very in the 1830s. I think going out by the 1840s, honestly, like on their way out by then, the hair is kind of sleek by the 1840s. And those frilly caps would probably be thought of as a little bit old-fashioned, but it totally works for Mrs. Piggy. And it is, you know, a style that people would have known in 1843. It's just not one that would have been current.
How was he at church?
Oh, as good as gold and better. He told me that he hoped the people saw him in church because it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
A remarkable child.
So that's a real line from Dickens. That's a classic bit of Dickens sentimentality there. Although they have changed it ever so slightly, because in the book, Tiny Tim calls himself a cripple. And yeah, I can see why you'd want to change that. And there's no harm in changing that for a modern audience. The line has still got its original feeling.
Such a meagre feast.
But very much appreciated.
So that's also a real observation that's made in the book, although I don't think Scrooge says it out loud. It's something that the narrator picks up on. I mean, this is more pudding erasure, basically, because they don't just have a goose, they also have a big pudding. And the narrator says, well, this is actually a really small pudding for so many people, but nobody would dare have said anything. No one would have even thought to say that, because they just enjoyed the dinner so much. Would American children be so confused by pudding? Would you? Can you not have a Christmas pudding?
I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I had him here. I would give him a piece of my mind to feast upon.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
To Mr. Scrooge, he'll be very merry and happy this day, I have no doubt.
So this is a real moment from the books. Bob Cratchit really does propose a toast to the founder of the feast, Ebenezer Scrooge. And Mrs. Cratchit really does say, I should give him a piece of my mind to feast upon. She doesn't call him badly dressed, though. That's a Miss Piggy addition. And the narrator also says that this is the only part of the Christmas feast that no one's enjoying. Like, everyone's just, all right, get that over with.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat by the chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner. If these shadows remain unaltered, I believe the child will die. But what then? If he's going to die, he'd better do it, and decrease the surplus population.
Are spirits' lives so short?
My time upon this globe is very brief.
Again, this is a little different in the book, and I can see why they've changed it. In the book, Scrooge notices a foot sticking out from under the ghost's robe, and he's like, what's that? And the ghost opens up his robe, and there's like two scruffy, scrawny children underneath, and he says, these are ignorance and want. I can't imagine that playing well with a 20th century audience, so it's probably fine for them to cut that, honestly. I think it's a little bit on the nose, even for Dickens.
And now I leave you with the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
You mean the future?
We had to explain what yet to come means for the kids.
Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
All right, so we've got Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. And this one's the easiest one to do, right? It's just the Grim Reaper, but without a scythe. And that's pretty much how Dickens describes him.
This is too scary. I don't think I want to see any more.
Oh, when you're right, you're right. You're on your own, folks. We'll meet you at the finale.
Yeah.
Gonzo and Rizzo are too funny for this scene. We got to get them out of here.
The night is waning fast. Lead on, Spirit.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When?
Last night, I believe.
Wonder what he died of. I thought he'd never go.
I'd just like to know what he's done for his money.
Well, he didn't give it to me.
Well, it's likely to be a cheap funeral.
I wouldn't mind going. If lunch is provided.
Actually, all those lines are almost straight from the book, so kudos to them for keeping them all in and making it sound so modern.
Now I've got his blankets.
His blankets. Why, Mrs. Dilber, they're still warm.
That is true. They do take his bed curtains down off the bed while he's still in it. And one of them says, like, is that okay? And she's like, I don't care.
The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heavens.
So they've missed it a little bit out, which I quite like in the book. Basically, Scrooge says, well, isn't there anyone who's, like, sad that this guy's gone? Isn't there anyone who was, like, connected to him? And the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come shows him, like, one of his debtors. Like, basically Mr. Appleyard or whatever from the first scene, who's, like, going home to his wife, going, well, Scrooge is dead, so I don't know who's going to get our debt now, but we'll at least get a couple of weeks to scrape some money together while they sort out the paperwork for it. So I thought that was a strong move on the part of Christmas Yet to Come, and I'm sad that they cut it.
Not Tiny Tim.
Michael Caine, he's got, like, tears in his eyes this whole movie. He's doing very well.
There now. My eyes get weak in the dim light. I would not want to show weak eyes to your father when he gets home for anything in the world. He should be back now.
I think he's walked a little slower these past 2 evenings. It would have done you good to see how green the place is. I am sure we shall never forget Tiny Tim, or this first parting that there was among us.
Genuinely tearing up a bit. They've done a really good job of, like, bringing this scene to life and showing the sort of gap that's made in this family by Tiny Tim's absence.
Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only?
That's a line from the book.
Yes, the bedposts were his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. But the thing that made Scrooge happiest of all was that his life lay before him, and it could be changed.
Yeah, that's very close to a line from the book. The bedpost was his own, the bed was his own, the room was his own, best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in.
I will live my life in the past, the present, and the future. Oh, Jacob and Robert Marley. Oh, heaven in the Christmas time be praised for this day. I say it on my knees, Jacob and Robert, on my knees. What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Well, today is Christmas Day.
Shout out to the Muppets Christmas Carol for getting that line right. It is what's today and not what day is this.
Day.
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits did it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course.
So that's all correct. And I guess the reason why he has to say it is because Marley did tell him it would be on 3 separate nights, and then it wasn't. I don't know why Dickens wrote it like that, though.
Do you know the poultry shop in the next street?
Yes, sir, I do.
An intelligent lad. A remarkable lad. Do you know whether the prize turkey has been sold in the window?
Oh, the one twice as big as me? It's still there.
Oh, it's a pleasure talking with you, lad. Go and buy it.
Be serious.
I am.
Until he says be serious, that is all pretty much from the book.
Buy it for me and I'll give you a shilling.
Oh.
No, I'll give you 5 shillings.
So in the book he says, go and get it, I'll give you a shilling. If you come back within 5 minutes, I'll give you a ½ crown. I don't know why they changed that. Maybe ½ crown wasn't going to play in America?
Put me down for...
That much?
Not a penny less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you.
Oh, my...
A gift? A gift for me?
So that's not in the book. He doesn't get a scarf from the charity guys. It's quite nice, and it also, like, I think just visually, like, makes him look a little brighter and warmer than, you know, that harsh black that he was wearing before. So it, you know, it signifies a change in his character. It works for film. Not something that happens in the book, but I think it's a good change for the cinema.
And a Merry Christmas.
Here's your turkey, Mr. Scrooge.
Follow me, lad.
So this is different from the book. So in the book, Scrooge does not go to Bob Cratchit's house. He sends the turkey. He pays for the boy to take a cab all the way down to Camden, which is where Bob Cratchit lives, by the way. So he pays for the cab and he sends the turkey there, but he does not go to Bob Cratchit's house because, of course, he has not been invited. It would be very weird for your employer to turn up at your house on Christmas and for you to have to now find an extra place for him and find extra food. He goes to the house he was invited to, which was his nephew's house. I understand why you've changed it, because Bob Cratchit is like a character we care about a lot more than we care about his nephew. But that's something that would have seemed very weird to Dickens, for Scrooge to go to Bob Cratchit's house. His old school teacher and Mr. Fezziwig are definitely dead. It's very sweet that they've brought them back for a last wave to the audience, but they're very dead.
So here you are.
Mr. Scrooge,
You, sir, were not at work this morning as we had discussed.
I have had my fill of you, Mr. Scrooge.
And therefore, Bob Cratchit.
And therefore, you can leave this house at once.
And therefore, I'm about to raise your salary.
Oh, and I am about to raise you right off the pavement and onto...
So Scrooge really does do this kind of prank on Bob Cratchit where he pretends that he's going to fire him and then says, I will raise your salary. But it happens the next day when Bob Cratchit comes back to work. Bob Cratchit gets to work on Boxing Day 30 minutes late, I think, 20 or 30 minutes late. And Scrooge is like, wow, what time do you call this? So that means that Mrs. Cratchit is not around to threaten to deck him, although I kind of wish she had been.
And Tiny Tim, who did not die...
Oh, isn't that swell?
That's from Dickens. He writes not in capital letters. So apparently, in the first draft, Dickens just didn't say what happened to Tiny Tim, and all his proofreaders were like, well, what about Tiny Tim? So that added in. He added in this line he did not die. Really jammed it in there.
To Tiny Tim, Scrooge became a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city ever had. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that truly be said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
So Gonzo's last speech there is mostly taken from Dickens, a couple of little changes, and that genuinely is the last line. As Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Scrooge doesn't get to steal it, though, in the book. And so that's the Muppets Christmas Carol. Honestly, I was really impressed with it. So much of the script is just taken word for word from the book. Costumes are really accurate. Even the Muppet costumes are accurate. I do have a bit of a beef with how they changed young Scrooge's character so that he never liked Christmas, but it's a small thing. I think overall it tells the same story. I loved the use of the puppets for the ghosts, especially. Michael Caine's performance was great. He manages to play it so straight against, threatening ghost Muppets. Overall, I was really impressed by how closely this movie followed the book, especially for a movie that's aimed at very small children. A lot of those lines are just lifted from Dickens. And to do that in a way that's accessible to modern day children, I think is a real feat. I've been very, very nitpicky with this movie, so I hope you understand that I actually really like it. There's a lot of good stuff in it. which is why I wanted to really examine it very closely and really hold it under the microscope. And of course, being historically accurate isn't necessarily something that might be important to filmmakers. You could have a very, very accurate movie that's very bad, and you could have a great movie that's not very accurate. Charles Dickens is trying to tell us that we're not celebrating Christmas properly like we used to in the medieval period or in the 18th century anymore. We need to return to these traditional values when Christmas was a wonderful, nostalgic time for all the family, a time for giving to charity, and a time for being together. And that's because the time when Dickens was writing actually marks a huge shift in the way British people celebrate Christmas at all. I was really shocked when I started to research Christmas that we kind of invented British Christmas in the 1840s specifically. So the 1840s is the decade when A Christmas Carol comes out, of course. This decade is also when the Christmas tree first becomes popular in Britain. Of course, Christmas trees have been a German tradition for a very long time, but it's not until the 1840s that the British royal family starts putting out illustrations of them all sat round the Christmas tree. And suddenly everybody wants one. And Prince Albert wasn't the first person to bring Christmas trees to Britain. He wasn't even the first royal to have a Christmas tree, but he was the first person to have it catch on. And some historians have argued that that might be because of the Industrial Revolution. More people are moving into cities, there's not as much greenery around them anymore, and they are pining for some leaves to decorate with in winter. Because of factories mass manufacturing cheap goods, it gets easier to give your kids presents at Christmas. By the end of the decade, even poor children are getting like an orange or some nuts for Christmas at least. The 1840s is when the Christmas cracker is invented. It's also where some of the best Christmas carols come from. Hark the Herald Angels Sing and O Come All Ye Faithful are both 1840s carols, and they are both S-tier carols. We start seeing more railways being built in the 1840s, and that means it's easier to go home and see your family for Christmas. And the Christmas card is invented in this decade by Henry Cole, and could not have been invented earlier because it builds off two inventions that had only just happened. First off, the postage stamp, meaning it's cheaper to post things than it used to be. And secondly, chromolithography, which is a printing process that makes it easier to print in colour. Before that, you would have either had to paint your Christmas cards by hand, or worse, send black and white Christmas cards. And to top it off, the 1840s had a cold snap, so they had more white Christmases than we do. So yeah, I think you have to acknowledge when you're making a Christmas Carol adaptation that the nostalgia that Dickens is feeling for medieval times is not the same nostalgia that we are feeling. We're feeling nostalgia for his period. And so I do think you have to take that into account. And that's something that Muppet's Christmas Carol does really well. So yeah, it's got the J. Draper London stamp of approval in terms of historical accuracy, if that means anything. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. I don't know what that was, but... So yeah, if you've not ever seen any other adaptations of Christmas Carol, try and get some other ones in over Christmas. The Patrick Stewart one is one of my favourites, but there's loads and loads out there. Or maybe even read the book. Cheers! Merry Christmas!